18 out of 100. The teacher's voice cracked across the silent classroom, more accusation than announcement. A few kids stifled laughs. Others just stared, hungry for the drama. Emma Reed, daughter of Catherine Reed. The name that opened doors before she even touched the handle sat straighter in her seat, her jaw tight. She forced her face into a mask of indifference as though the grade didn't matter. But inside, something twisted hard in her chest. The red scrawl glared at her from the page like blood. 18-100. She folded the paper in half with a lazy flick, sliding it into her designer backpack. Her smirk, fragile and practiced, remained because the smirk was armor. The bell shrieked and the room exploded in chatter. "Guess money doesn't buy brains," someone muttered under their breath. Emma didn't flinch. She stood, slipped her sunglasses on inside, of course, and strode out into the hallway as if it were a runway built only for her. Outside in the parking lot, her black Audi gleamed like a trophy. She tapped the key fob, savoring the jealous glances. But before she could climb in, a tow truck lurched forward. Chains clanged, metal groaned. Her car was hoisted into the air like a carcass. "What is this?" Emma barked, throwing her arms wide. The driver didn't even look at her. Order came from the owner, Catherine Reed. Laughter erupted behind her. Students whipped out phones, capturing the billionaire's daughter watching her prized car being carried away like confiscated contraband. Emma shoved through the crowd, heat boiling her skin. She stormed back inside, down a side hall no one used. Her sneakers squeaked on the polished floor. That's when she heard a mop sliding in a slow, steady rhythm. At the far end, a man in a faded blue janitor's uniform moved in careful arcs. His hair was peppered with gray, his jaw rough with stubble. His sleeves were rolled forearms corded with work. He didn't look up when Emma slammed past, but his voice came low, almost casual. "If you want to win, kid, start at 0. Emma froze, half turning. "Excuse me." The man leaned on the mop handle, calm as still water. His eyes didn't flinch. "All that noise out there, cars, clothes, grades. It's nothing. You want to learn?" "Start at 0. Emma barked out a laugh. "Yeah, thanks, Shakespeare. I'll keep that in mind while you're waxing the floors." The man didn't bite. He just pushed the mop forward again, water spreading like glass across the tiles. "Floors stay clean when you do the work. So do people." Emma rolled her eyes and walked off, but her chest burned. "Start at 0. The words clung like gum to her shoes. That night home was no escape. Catherine Reed stood in the marble kitchen like a queen out of patience, phone pressed to her ear, voice sharp as glass. "No, the report is unacceptable. I don't pay for excuses. I pay for results." She ended the call with a tap, then turned to her daughter. "You got an 18. Emma leaned against the fridge, arms crossed. "So, I don't need algebra to run a company. That's what accountants are for." Her mother's eyes, steel gray, narrowed. "Don't you dare talk to me like you've earned the right to dismiss it. If you worked for me, you'd be fired. I'm not your employee, I'm your daughter," she shot back, defiance dripping from each word. "Big difference." Catherine stepped closer. The perfume of power clung to her, expensive and suffocating. "The world doesn't care, Emma. Either you become someone, or you'll be another rich kid with no spine. And I won't carry you." For a moment the kitchen went silent, but for the ticking of a clock. Emma wanted to spit back something sharp, but the weight in her mother's words pressed against her, heavy and merciless. She grabbed a soda, cracked it open, and walked away without another word. The next morning, Catherine made her promise real. Emma's credit cards canceled, her car gone, her driver reassigned. So there she was, standing at the bus stop with the rest of the students she had spent years mocking. Her tailored jacket didn't shield her from the cold looks. By the time she dragged herself into the building, the sneers were knives. She shoved her hands deep in her pockets and marched down the hall. The janitor was there again, mop in hand, earbuds tucked in. This time, Emma heard him whispering under his breath. "The only true wisdom," the man said softly, "is in knowing you know nothing." Emma slowed. "What did you just say?" The janitor looked up, unbothered. "Nothing you're ready to understand, girl. the words sliced deeper than any insult. Emma forced a laugh, shaking her head. "You're some kind of philosopher now, quoting dead guys while scrubbing gum off the floor." The janitor's mouth twitched, half a smile, half pity. "It's a stranger, isn't it? A girl with the world at her feet who can't pass a reading test." Emma's cheeks flushed hot. "Screw you." But when she walked away, the heat didn't fade. It grew crawling under her skin. By third period, it was undeniable. Another test returned, this one worse. Her teacher didn't even speak when she handed it back. Just the look, tired, disappointed, almost pitying. Emma stared down at the paper, 24%. Below, written in neat cursive, "Did you even read the passage?" The classroom blurred. Laughter hissed around her. For once, Emma didn't smirk. Later that afternoon, she ducked through the back entrance to avoid more eyes. And there he was again, mop bucket, the faint smell of lemon cleaner, calm eyes that didn't look away. The janitor straightened slowly. Rough day. Emma's throat tightened. She hated herself for even pausing. "You said something last time about Socrates. You remembered." Emma shifted defensive. "Yeah. Weird for a janitor to quote philosophers." The man wiped his hands on a rag, arms crossed. "Weirder still when a girl born with every advantage can't sit still long enough to learn." Emma winced. "You used to be a teacher, didn't you?" The man didn't answer immediately. His gaze sharpened, measuring. Then, "Not just philosophy. Plenty more. Before life threw me off balance." Silence. Students laughed down the hall. Emma swallowed hard. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like mocking. She felt like begging. "Then teach me," she whispered. "Please." The janitor studied her for a long moment, eyes steady. Finally, he nodded once. "On one condition." Emma leaned forward. "What you leave your name and your pride at the door. Start from zero, from the floor." Emma's chest rose and fell. She thought of her mother's words, the humiliation that clung to her like smoke. "Fine," she said. Her voice cracked, but she didn't back down. I can't keep failing." The janitor extended his hand. "Caleb Hale." Emma shook it. Emma. Caleb's grip was firm, steady, the kind of grip that made promises. Then, tomorrow, Caleb said we begin. Emma lay awake that night staring at the green notebook Caleb had shoved into her hands, its blank pages daring her to either waste them or let them change everything. The hallway was nearly empty when Emma showed up the next morning. Dawn light streamed weakly through high windows, painting the floor in pale gold. The school was still asleep, locked in silence, but the steady rhythm of a mop moving across tile broke it. Caleb was there, sleeves rolled, shoulders bent in work. Emma stood at the end of the corridor, clutching the green notebook from the night before. Her sneakers squeaked faintly as she walked forward. Caleb didn't look up. "You're early." Emma cleared her throat. "You said we'd start today." Finally, the janitor lifted his gaze. Those eyes steady, unhurried, like he'd already seen kids like Emma 1,000 times, met hers without flinching. "I did. But before we start, we settle something." He leaned the mop against the wall, folding the rag in his hands with surgical precision. "This isn't your mother's empire, and it isn't my job. It's work. Real work. You want me to teach you, you leave your name at the door." Emma frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I don't care if you're Reed Rockefeller or royalty. In this hallway, you're just a kid with a notebook. If you can't stomach that, you walk away now." Emma hesitated, the weight of pride coiling in her throat. The instinct was to fire back, to remind this man who she was, what name she carried. But the humiliation of that 18, of a standing at the bus stop like a pauper, of losing her car and her friend's smirks, it all rushed back at once. Slowly she nodded. "Fine. I'll leave it." Caleb held out his hand. "Say it." Emma's jaw clenched. "My name doesn't matter. Again, my name doesn't matter." Caleb's eyes flickered with something approval, maybe even respect. He handed the girl a pen. "Good. Then let's see if your words matter." They sat on a bench outside the unused east wing. Dust motes spun in the sunlight, and the smell of floor wax hung in the air. Page 1. Caleb instructed. Write about your greatest fear. 10 minutes. Don't stop the pen even if all you write is garbage. Keep moving. Emma scowled. That's stupid. What's the point? The point, Caleb said calmly, is that your head is noisy. Pride excuses distractions. 10 minutes of writing strips the noise. What's left, that's the truth. Emma rolled her eyes but opened the notebook. Blank lines stared back like an enemy. She tapped the pen against the paper every second a war. I'm not scared of anything, she muttered. That's fear talking, Caleb replied. Emma shot him a glare but put pen to page. At first it was nonsense. Scribbles, complaints, half-formed words. Then something cracked. The letters spilled faster, messier. Her hand cramped her chest tight, but she didn't stop. When the 10 minutes ended, Caleb simply said, Done. Emma slammed the pen down. Yeah, whatever. Caleb didn't reach for the notebook. He didn't ask to read it. He just said, bring it tomorrow. Rewrite it. Then again the next day. Fear only shrinks when you look it in the eye 3 times. Emma frowned. What if it doesn't? Then you weren't looking hard enough. The following day, Emma showed again. And the next. The ritual repeated 10 minutes writing, 10 minutes reflection. One morning, she snapped. This isn't working. I keep writing the same crap. Caleb shrugged. Then dig deeper. Writing's like mopping floors. One pass makes it look fine. The second shows the stains. The third, that's when you see the real floor. Emma barked out a bitter laugh. You and your metaphors, man. You want easy metaphors, go back to excuses. You want to win, keep writing. By the 4th morning, Emma found herself arriving earlier than Caleb. She sat on the bench, notebook open, scribbling before the janitor even walked in. When Caleb noticed, he said nothing, but the corner of his mouth twitched upward. You know what your problem is, Reed? He asked quietly. Emma looked up. I thought we left the name at the door. Exactly. Your problem is you keep sneaking it back in. Emma bristled. I'm trying, all right. Trying doesn't build muscle. Reps do. So here's your first real rep. Write about the thing you won't say out loud. The thing that makes you feel small. Emma stiffened. That's why you need to write it. For a long moment, Emma stared at the page. Her pen hovered, then dropped ink. The words came halting, awkward. But they came. By the end of the week, the notebook had pages filled with crooked handwriting. Caleb never read a word. Not once. One afternoon, Emma finally blurted, Why don't you check if it's even good? Because it's not about good, Caleb replied. It's about honest, and only you know if it's that. Emma sat back stunned. Teachers had always measured her by grades, by performance, but this man didn't care. You really don't care what my mother thinks, Emma asked. Not my job to care. My job is to make sure when you look in a mirror you see someone worth remembering. For the first time, Emma felt something shift, a crack in the armor. At lunch, whispers trailed her. Josh nudged his friend, sneering, Look at Reed spending her mornings with the janitor. Maybe she'll learn how to push a mop. Emma's fists clenched, but when she turned, Caleb was there at the end of the hall, mop in hand, calm as ever. Their eyes met. Caleb gave the smallest shake of his head. Emma exhaled, unclenched, walked away. Later, when she slammed her notebook shut in frustration, Caleb placed a hand on it. Ego wins fights. Patience wins wars. Which do you want? Emma stared at him. For once, she didn't have a snappy answer. That night, back in her room, Emma stared at the green notebook on her desk. Her mother's empire, her cold ambition, the jeers of classmates, they all pressed in. She opened the notebook and read her own words for the first time. The handwriting was ugly, the thoughts raw, but buried in the chaos was something real. Maybe she thought for the first time in her life the janitor was right. Emma shows up at dawn again, only to find Priya waiting by the library doors asking if she can join the secret lessons. The abandoned wing of Ridgeview High smelled like dust and rainwater trapped in the vents. Once a proud library, it now sat forgotten. Its shelves half empty. The carpet-frayed ceiling tiles stained with years of leaks. It was quiet, almost reverent, as though the ghosts of old books whispered encouragement to anyone brave enough to enter. That morning, Emma pushed open the heavy door with her shoulder a green notebook tucked under her arm. She wasn't sure why she'd come. Maybe because she knew Caleb would be there mopping floors as if he belonged to the building's bones. Or maybe because her own reflection in the mirror that morning had felt hollow. Caleb Emma called into the dim light. The janitor appeared from between the shelves, mop in hand, bucket rolling beside him. His expression didn't shift, neither surprise nor welcome. Just steady. "You came back," Caleb said. Voice even. Emma shrugged. "Don't make it sound like a miracle. I'm not here to worship you. I wouldn't ask you to." Caleb leaned the mop against a shelf. "I'm here for the work." "You," Emma tapped the notebook. "Guess I want to see if starting at zero means more than scrubbing floors." Caleb didn't answer. Instead, he pointed to a small table in the corner where shafts of light pierced through cracked blinds. "Sit. Right." Emma slid into the chair, flipping open to a blank page. The silence was heavy until a new voice broke it. "Am I interrupting?" Emma turned. Priya Patel, top of their science class, stood timidly in the doorway hugging a stack of textbooks. Her glasses slid down her nose and strands of hair had escaped her braid. She looked as though she'd accidentally stumbled into a crime scene. "This isn't tutoring," Emma said sharply. "It's something else." Priya hesitated. "I just thought maybe I could join. My lab reports are fine, but when it comes to essays I freeze. You're not the only one failing English read." Emma opened her mouth to dismiss her, but Caleb raised a hand. "If you're here to work, you're welcome. But leave the names at the door. In here, you're not a prodigy and you're not a read. You're just students." Priya's face softened, almost relieved. She slid into the chair across from Emma. Emma muttered under her breath. "Great. Now it's a club for misfits." Caleb heard. "Better misfits who build something than heirs who break everything." Emma's jaw tightened, but she bent over her notebook again. The scratch of pens filled the room. For the first time, the silence wasn't suffocating. It was purposeful. By lunch, word had spread. Josh Carmichael, captain of the football team, stormed in with two buddies' phone already recording. He panned the camera across the room, his voice dripping with mockery. "Look at this, boys. The Princess of Ridgeview sitting with the janitor and the nerd. Guess the trust fund ran dry." Laughter erupted from his friends. Josh zoomed in on Emma. "Smile, read. This is going on TikTok. Hashtag Princess of Janitors." Emma shot up, fists clenched. "Delete it, Josh, or I'll—" "You'll what?" Josh sneered. "Cry on my sneakers." Emma lunged, but Caleb stepped between them, firm but calm. His presence was quiet authority, the kind that didn't need shouting. "Stop," Caleb said. "He's mocking me." Emma's voice cracked with fury. "Your ego wants to win today," Caleb said, locking eyes with her, "but your mind. It wants to win for life. Decide which one you'll feed." The words sliced through the tension like a scalpel. Emma froze, chest heaving. Her fists trembled, but slowly she lowered them. Josh scoffed, pocketing his phone. "Whatever, man. Enjoy being janitor royalty." He strutted out with his friends, their laughter fading down the hall. The silence that followed was unbearable. Emma collapsed back into her chair, ashamed. "You think I'm weak now?" "No," Caleb replied, voice steady. "I think you're learning restraint. It's harder than throwing a punch." Priya's eyes glimmered with something like admiration. She slid a paper across the table. "Emma, I read what you wrote earlier." She stiffened. "You weren't supposed to." Her voice dropped to a whisper. It was honest. Raw. "You wrote like someone who actually feels. That's rare." Emma turned away, heat rising in her cheeks. "It's garbage." "It's not," Priya insisted. "You have a voice. You just need to let it be honest." Her words echoed in Emma louder than Josh's insults, louder than Caleb's challenges. For the first time, someone her age wasn't mocking or dismissing her, she was seeing her. That evening, Emma lingered after Priya left. Caleb was shelving abandoned books, his movements deliberate. Emma finally broke the silence. Do you think I can really change? Or am I just destined to be the screw-up everyone thinks I am? Caleb didn't look up. Change isn't a destiny, it's a decision. And if I fail again, then you start at zero, again and again, until failure is just part of the repetition that builds you. Emma swallowed hard, clutching the green notebook like a lifeline. For the first time in her life, the words of an adult didn't sound like judgment, they sounded like possibility. She didn't know it yet, but the abandoned library had just become the birthplace of something larger than herself. And somewhere deep down, Emma Reed, arrogant, privileged, broken, began to wonder if the janitor might actually be right. Catherine Reed moved like someone who owned every inch of space she entered. The conference room at Ridgeview High was no exception. Its walls were lined with framed photos of past graduating classes' smiling faces immortalized in cheap gold frames. But when Catherine sat across from Principal Horwitz, the air shifted. Authority had a way of following her, as if she carried it in her designer leather tote along with her tablet and fountain pen. Principal Horwitz cleared his throat. He was used to dealing with wealthy parents' demands for better grades, requests for special accommodations. But Catherine wasn't here for indulgence. She was here for control. Ms. Reed Horwitz began cautiously. Emma has been engaging in some extracurricular activities. Nothing inappropriate but unusual. We've received reports she's been spending time in the old library. With the janitor. Catherine's jaw tightened. Caleb Hale. You know him, I know of him, she replied curtly. And I know my daughter doesn't need to be taking advice from a man pushing a mop. Horwitz raised a hand, nervous. He's not interfering with instruction. In fact, some students say he's helping. Writing, reading, that sort of thing. Catherine's laugh was sharp and cold. Helping my daughter has access to the best tutors in the state. I pay more for a single weekend session than that man makes in a month. Emma doesn't need mops and metaphors. She needs results. Her words echoed against the sterile glass walls of the conference room. That evening, the Reeds sat at their long dining table. The chandelier above cast golden light on untouched plates of roasted chicken and greens. Catherine sipped her wine, slowly waiting for Emma to speak first. She didn't. Finally, Catherine set her glass down with a delicate clink. I had a meeting with your principal today. Emma stiffened but kept her eyes on her plate. He tells me you've been spending time with the janitor. That true Emma looked up defiant. His name's Caleb. And yeah, I have. He's the first person who actually sees me as more than a last name. Catherine's eyes narrowed. Emma, listen carefully. If you choose him, you lose everything. Do you understand? Your privileges, your opportunities gone. I will not have my daughter throwing away her future for the sake of... What sentimental nonsense! Emma shoved back her chair, the scrape loud against the polished hardwood. You don't get it. For once I feel like I'm not failing. He doesn't talk to me like I'm broken. You think I want you to feel broken? Her voice cracked, not from weakness, but from the weight of unspoken truth. Emma shook her head. You don't want me at all. You want the perfect heir to the Reed legacy. Guess what, Mom? That girl doesn't exist. She stormed upstairs, the slam of her bedroom door reverberating through the house like a verdict. Catherine sat frozen, staring at her reflection in the glass cabinet across the room. The glass showed a woman who controlled empires yet couldn't hold her daughter's respect for a single dinner. Later that night, Catherine walked the quiet halls of Ridgeview, her heels clicking softly against the tile. The school was dark, except for the faint glow of the exit signs. She hadn't meant to stop there, but her car had pulled into the lot almost unconsciously. And then she saw him. Caleb Hale stood in the hallway, sleeves rolled up, mop propped against his shoulder like a weary soldier's weapon. His daughter, Maya, no older than 9, sat cross-legged against the wall sketching on a notepad. Caleb leaned down, tying the loose laces on her sneakers with practiced care. Catherine froze. The image struck her harder than she expected. A man she had dismissed as irrelevant was there quietly anchoring his daughter's world with patience and tenderness. His hands, roughened from labor, moved with gentleness that contradicted his worn uniform. For a moment, Catherine's glass wall cracked. She saw something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years: envy. Envy of the simplicity, the unshakable bond. Her phone buzzed in her purse, pulling her back. She turned sharply, heels echoing as she left the building before either of them noticed her. But the image clung to her like perfume that wouldn't wash away. Back home, Catherine stood outside Emma's door listening. No music blared, no game controllers clicked. Just silence, broken only by the faint sound of paper rustling. The green notebook. She pressed her hand to the doorframe, torn. She wanted to knock to demand control again, but some instinct told her she'd only push her further away. So she walked to her study instead. Sitting behind her massive oak desk, she stared at the alphabet charts tucked in the bottom drawer. The old text-to-speech device still functioning. Remnants of her own battles, the ones Emma never knew. She whispered to the empty room. If she chooses him, maybe it's because I never gave her a choice. Her reflection stared back from the glass wall of her office. A woman unbreakable in business but fragile in the one place that mattered most, home. The old library smelled like dust and forgotten ambitions. Rows of unused shelves leaned against one another like tired soldiers, and a single bulb buzzed overhead, fighting to stay alive. But for Emma Reed, this dim room was starting to feel less like a relic and more like a second chance. 6 chairs had been dragged into a rough circle. A crooked table in the corner held notebooks, stubby pencils, and a dented thermos that Caleb Hale always carried with him. It wasn't much, but maybe that was the point. Caleb stood at the center mop, leaning against the wall nearby. He looked at the cluster of students, Emma, Priya, 2 juniors whose names she barely knew, and another freshman who sat with his hood up, too shy to make eye contact. Then there was Maya, Caleb's 9-year-old daughter's sketchbook balanced on her knees. "Welcome," Caleb said simply. His voice carried no authority badge, no threat of grades or failure. Just presence. "This is not a classroom, this is a workshop. If you came here to be graded, you're in the wrong place. But if you came to write to fight with words instead of fists, you're exactly where you need to be." Emma shifted in her seat. A week ago, she would have rolled her eyes. Today, she found herself leaning forward. Caleb passed out green notebooks, new though the covers were already scuffed from being carried in his bag. "Rule number 1, leave your last names at the door. In here, it doesn't matter if you're a Reed or a Rhodes Scholar or a nobody. You start at 0, just like everyone else." The hooded freshman peeked up, curiosity flickering. "Rule number 2, Caleb continued. Honesty isn't optional. If you fake it, your words will collapse under their own weight. But if you mean it, even if it's messy, it'll stand." He let the silence hang before adding, "Rule number 3, we defend each other in this space. Out there, people will laugh. In here, we listen." Priya raised her hand. "And if someone makes fun of us anyway," Emma smirked, but Caleb answered first. "Then we remind them laughter doesn't erase truth. It only proves they were afraid to hear it." Maya's pencil scratched quietly as she drew. She tilted her sketchbook toward the group. In the middle of the page was a circle with the words, "Start at 0, curving around its edge." Letters, bold, imperfect, alive. Caleb looked at her work and nodded. "Guess we've got ourselves a logo." The group chuckled. Emma caught herself smiling before she could stop it. That week, Caleb gave them their first assignment. Write about something you'd defend, even if no one else stood with you. Emma stared at the blank page. Her pen hovered, refusing to commit. The old Emma would have written something shallow: her clothes, her family name, maybe her phone. But those words tasted hollow now. Finally, her pen scraped across the paper. "I'd defend someone who can't defend themselves," she wrote. Her hand trembled, but the words came faster. "Because maybe once I was that person." When she read her piece aloud, the room shifted. Priya's eyes softened. The hooded freshman lowered his hood, and for the first time, Emma felt her voice didn't sound like a fraud. Priya leaned toward her, later whispering, "You have a voice. You just need to let it be honest." Her words echoed in Emma's chest long after the session ended. Meanwhile, Catherine Reed's black SUV pulled into the school parking lot one late afternoon. She had been summoned for a board meeting but arrived early. From across the lot, she noticed a small cluster near the curb. Caleb, in his worn janitor's uniform, crouched down to tie Maya's shoelaces. His calloused hands moved with deliberate care, double knotting them like a craftsman securing something fragile. Maya giggled, showing him the logo she'd drawn. He smiled, tucking her hair behind her ear with a tenderness Catherine couldn't look away from. Catherine froze. For years, she had convinced herself that success meant steel and distance walls of glass and measured words. But watching Caleb's hands steady his daughter's world with something as simple as a knot in her laces unsettled her. She wasn't sure if it was admiration envy or something far more dangerous. When Caleb stood, his eyes briefly met hers across the lot. She expected him to flinch, maybe bow his head in respect like so many others did around her. He didn't. He simply looked steady and unshaken before turning back to his daughter. Catherine lingered longer than she should have, the image burning in her mind even after she walked away. Back in the library, the group circle grew tighter each day. Students who'd once barely nodded in the hallways were now passing folded pages to each other, marking lines they loved. One afternoon, Josh, the star athlete who'd mocked Emma weeks before, stormed in with his phone held high. "Look at this, everyone. Princess of Janitors sitting in Storytime Circle." Emma's fist clenched. She half rose from her chair. Caleb's voice cut through the tension like a bell. "Emma, chasing pride is easy. But building wisdom that's for life, which one do you want to feed?" The words landed heavy. Emma sank back into her chair, jaw tight but eyes alive. Josh laughed, but it rang hollow. He left without another word. Caleb leaned down, speaking quietly to her. "Every time you fight the small battles, you lose the war you haven't even begun. Let them laugh. You keep writing." Emma swallowed hard. For the first time, she believed him. That night, Emma sat on her bed, notebook open. Her green cover was already worn at the edges. She thought about Caleb's words, Priya's whisper, Maya's circle, logo. She wrote in bold letters across a clean page, "Start at 0. And for the first time in her life, the words didn't feel like punishment. They felt like freedom. 78. Emma whispered, staring at the graded paper in her hands. For the first time in her Ridgeview career, the number at the top wasn't dripping in failure. It wasn't perfect, not even close, but it was a B+. The bell rang. Students spilled out into the hallway and Emma stayed frozen in her seat. The red-inked score seemed to burn through the page. For once, she wasn't embarrassed to carry it home. For once, she didn't feel like a fraud. She found Caleb that afternoon in the dim library, where the little circle of mismatched desks had slowly become their refuge. Priya was scribbling notes. Maya was quietly drawing their circular Start at 0 emblem in her notebook. Emma dropped the graded paper onto the table. B+. Her voice cracked like she didn't trust it. Priya's eyes widened. That's incredible, Emma. Caleb studied the paper in silence, then glanced up. "Tell me," he said, "did you earn it because you guessed better or because you worked differently?" Emma swallowed. "Because I worked. Because I—" She tapped the green notebook. "I actually wrote until the words made sense." For a second, the corner of Caleb's mouth tilted into that elusive smile. "Then it's not a grade, it's a compass." Emma let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. It wasn't pride exactly, it was relief. For once, she wasn't drowning. The relief didn't last long. By the following week, rumors about the janitor's secret class spread through the halls like wildfire. Josh, the school's golden athlete with a smirk sharp enough to cut glass, strutted past Emma in the cafeteria. He held up his phone, the screen glowing with a shaky video. "Hey, Princess of Janitors," Josh sneered loud enough for the whole table to hear. "Gonna mop up my essay next?" Laughter erupted. Emma felt heat creep up her neck. She lunged forward, fists tightening only for Caleb's calm voice to cut through from behind. "Win the moment and you'll lose the future. Win with your mind and the future is yours." Emma froze. The room fell awkwardly quiet. Even Josh, momentarily thrown off, shoved his phone back into his pocket and stormed away. But trouble doesn't vanish, it ferments. 2 days later, Emma walked into the library to find Caleb standing stiffly by the door, the principal beside him. "This ends now," Principal Horwitz declared. His voice echoed against the dusty shelves. "No unauthorized teaching, no writing groups. Mr. Hale, your suspension from mentoring is effective immediately." Emma's stomach dropped. Suspension? For what? "He's the only reason half of us are even passing," Horwitz shot her a warning glare. "The school board cannot condone a janitor running his own classroom," as opposed to what Emma snapped. "Letting us fail quietly." Priya tugged her sleeve, terrified. But Emma wouldn't let it go. "You don't care if we learn, you just care about who gets the credit." Horwitz ignored her. "Mr. Hale, turn in your keys to the library. Immediately." Caleb didn't argue. He didn't flinch. He simply reached into his pocket, laid the keys on the desk, and turned toward the door. Emma's voice broke. "Say something. You didn't do anything wrong." Caleb paused, looking back only long enough to meet her desperate eyes. His voice was quiet, but it cut deeper than shouting ever could. "Right doesn't need applause," he said. "Keep writing." Then he walked away, each step carrying the weight of someone who had already lost more than this once before. That night, Emma sat at her desk, the green notebook open, pen hovering uselessly. For hours, she stared at the blank page, waiting for anger to turn into words. Instead, all she could think of was Caleb's retreating figure, the slump of his shoulders, the silence that said more than defense ever could. By midnight, she finally wrote, "If the world only listens to titles, maybe the only way to be heard is to erase mine. To start at zero." She underlined the words twice, the ink cutting into the page like a wound. The next day, Josh cornered her by the lockers. "Guess your janitor buddy's gone." Back to being read the failure, huh? Emma didn't rise to it. For the first time, she didn't take the bait. She just looked Josh in the eye and said, "Funny thing about zero. You can try to bury it, but it's always where things begin." Josh blinked, momentarily stunned. Emma walked away before the smirk could return. Still, the emptiness followed her. With Caleb gone, the library felt like a tomb. Priya whispered, "What if he never comes back?" Emma clenched her jaw. She wanted to believe Caleb's words, but belief was heavier without proof. That night, as rain hammered against her window, Emma stared at the green notebook again. She whispered to herself the same way Caleb had once done in the hall, "If you want to really win, start at zero." The words no longer sounded like a lesson. They sounded like a promise. Emma pressed her forehead to the cool glass, watching the storm outside. Somewhere beyond the thunder, Caleb was walking alone, carrying burdens Emma hadn't begun to understand. And for the first time, she realized maybe Caleb needed saving too. The Reed mansion glittered in silence that night, its glass walls throwing back the faint shimmer of city lights. But inside, the air was brittle, as if every word spoken could snap it apart. Emma sat across from her mother at the long oak dining table, the untouched plates between them already cold. Catherine Reed adjusted her silver cuff bracelet, a habit when she was unsettled. "Your grades are improving, Emma," she said, her voice clipped. "But don't think I don't know where you've been spending your time. The principal told me about those sessions." Emma pushed her fork aside. Her voice cracked, not from fear, but from months of holding in what had been clawing at her. "I don't need more lectures about grades, Mom. I don't need another tutor in a suit who charges more per hour than some people make in a week. I need—" Her voice broke, then returned sharp. "I need a mother who believes in me, not just the Reed name." Catherine's eyes flashed. "I believe in you, Emma. That's why I push. Because the world won't give you second chances." "No," Emma shot back, her knuckles white against the table. "You don't believe in me. You believe in the empire, in appearances, in perfection. But I'm not your empire. I'm your daughter." The words landed heavy, splitting the silence into shards. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint ticking of the antique clock in the hallway. Catherine's throat tightened, but she pressed her lips together, unwilling to let the crack widen. Emma stood so suddenly that the chair legs scraped harshly against the marble floor. "I don't need a billionaire. I need a mom." Her voice trembled, but the truth in it was undeniable. She slammed her bedroom door moments later, leaving Catherine in the cavernous dining room that suddenly felt unbearably empty. Hours later, Catherine sat alone in her study, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She had weathered hostile boardrooms, lawsuits, betrayals by men twice her age and twice as ruthless. But nothing had ever gutted her like hearing those words from her own child. Through the glass wall of her office, she saw movement below. In the dim parking lot, Caleb Hale bent down beside his daughter's small figure. Maya wore her pink backpack, one strap slipping off her shoulder. Catherine watched as Caleb knelt and carefully tied her shoelaces, his rough hands moving with practiced tenderness. Maya leaned into him, resting her small hand against his cheek, and Catherine felt something uncoil painfully in her chest. For the first time in years, she envied a man who had nothing she did. No empire, no billion-dollar legacy. Only the simple currency of love, freely given. She turned away quickly, almost ashamed that she was watching, but the image had already carved itself deep inside her. The next morning, a meeting took place in the principal's office. Miss Delgado, the guidance counselor, leaned forward, her dark eyes full of empathy. "Emma isn't failing because she doesn't care, Catherine. She's struggling because the system doesn't fit her. She shows signs of dysgraphia, maybe even mild dyslexia. It's not about intelligence, it's about wiring." Catherine straightened in her chair, arms crossed. She has every resource. Private tutors test prep the best schools. She's simply not applying herself. Delgado shook her head gently. "I've seen this too many times. The harder parents push for perfection, the more the child collapses under the weight. What Emma needs isn't pressure, it's support under the law. A Section 504 plan could give her extra time on tests, alternative formats for assignments. It's not a crutch, it's a bridge." Catherine's jaw tightened. The word law always triggered a defensive instinct. She'd built her career on iron contracts and closed loopholes. But when she glanced sideways at Emma slouched in the chair beside her, she saw not rebellion in her face, but exhaustion. Her daughter's eyes were ringed with the fatigue of someone who had been fighting invisible battles alone. Delgado placed the form on the desk, sliding it toward her. "All it takes is your signature." Catherine hesitated. Her pen hovered, her breath caught in her throat. Signing felt like an admission that maybe Emma's failures weren't rebellion, but struggle. That maybe she had been blind to it all along. Emma didn't speak. She didn't plead. She just stared at her mother with a strange, quiet hope. For once, she wasn't demanding freedom or fighting for pride. She was waiting to see if Catherine would step across the invisible line between control and compassion. Finally, Catherine signed. The ink felt heavier than any contract she'd ever put her name to. She slid the paper back across the desk without a word. That evening, Emma sat on the edge of her bed, flipping through the green notebook Caleb had given her. She traced the faint indentations of her own words. Fears, failures, half-formed thoughts that had never made it to her mother's ears. She closed the notebook and whispered into the quiet, "You're the only one who sees me." On her way to the kitchen, Emma passed by her mother's study. The door was slightly ajar. She hesitated, then peeked in. Catherine was at her desk, her head bowed over documents. For once, she didn't look like a titan of industry. She looked tired, fragile, human. Emma almost knocked, almost walked in, but stopped herself. Some walls couldn't be crossed in one night. Instead, she turned back toward her room, notebook in hand. Her phone buzzed. A message from Priya Library tomorrow. We'll rewrite together. Emma smiled faintly for the first time all week. Later that night, Catherine walked past Emma's door. She paused when she saw the thin strip of light under it. For a moment, she raised her hand as if to knock, but she lowered it again, retreating to her own room, alone. And so the house stayed divided, two hearts on opposite sides of silence, yet both carrying the faint unspoken memory of a shoelace tied in the dark and a signature inked under trembling fingers. For Emma, it was the beginning of hope. For Catherine, it was the faintest crack in the armor. The old library smelled of paper and dust, a place where secrets seemed to hang in the air. That night, Caleb sat at the far table, Maya asleep on the worn couch nearby with her sketchbook sliding from her small hand. Emma had already slipped home after a long evening of rewriting essays, leaving only Catherine standing in the doorway. She hadn't meant to linger, but she did. Watching the janitor, the man quietly stacking papers into neat piles, she realized he moved with the precision of someone who once belonged here, not just as a caretaker, but as a guide. "Caleb," she said softly. He glanced up, surprised to find her there. His eyes carried the weight of someone who had already prepared for the conversation he knew would eventually come. "You used to be a teacher, didn't you?" Catherine asked. Caleb exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. His gaze drifted toward the ceiling as if searching for words hidden in the rafters. "I wasn't just a teacher. I built a writing program, a place where kids who had no voice could find one. We called it the Ridgeview Lab. It wasn't fancy, just notebooks, mismatched chairs, and a belief that words could save someone before the world broke them." Catherine's brow furrowed. "What happened?" His jaw tightened. It was cut. Budget slashed after a merger. Donors decided STEM was shinier, safer. Literature, they said, didn't pay dividends. They gutted it. I walked out with a cardboard box, a folder of old lesson plans, and no job. My wife was still alive then. She believed we'd rebuild. But 2 years later, she was gone. And all I had left was Maya. The room was silent, except for the hum of the old heater. Catherine's throat ached. She knew mergers, numbers, donations. She knew how a line on a ledger could end someone's calling. "What merger?" she asked quietly. Caleb's eyes flicked to hers. They held a heaviness that told her he already knew she wouldn't like the answer. "The district merged with Ridgeview Foundation Support. You might have heard of them." Catherine's breath caught. Her last name pressed down on her like lead. Reed, her father's legacy, her board signatures, her own public approval. The Reed Foundation had cut the deal that erased his life's work. Her voice faltered. "I was one of the signatories. My team told me it was necessary restructuring. I thought—" She broke off, unable to finish the sentence. "You thought it was just paperwork," Caleb said flatly. "Not cruel, just tired. But for me, it wasn't paperwork. It was everything." The truth landed like a stone between them. Catherine closed her eyes, her manicured fingers trembling as they pressed against the edge of the table. "I never thought wounds cut years ago could still bleed," she whispered. Caleb gave a half-smile that wasn't really a smile at all. "We don't heal them, we just hide them better, until someone comes along and rips the bandage off." Her eyes stung, but she didn't let the tears fall. She couldn't not hear, not in front of him. Yet, for the first time in years, she didn't feel like the woman who commanded boardrooms. She felt like someone's daughter again, a girl who had once hidden her own secret. Caleb gathered Maya's sketchbook and tucked it gently into her backpack. "You see, Catherine, I don't blame you personally, not anymore, but sometimes when I walk these halls mop in hand, I remember that once I stood in front of students with fire in their eyes, and then I remember the silence that followed when the doors closed. That silence doesn't go away." Catherine gripped the back of a chair, needing the anchor. "I spent my whole life pretending to be strong, because if people knew the truth, they'd never follow me." He turned toward her. "What truth?" Her lips parted, but she said nothing. Not yet. Later that night, Emma wandered the halls, unable to sleep. Something had been gnawing at her since the heated dinner with her mother. She crept into Catherine's study, a place she had always guarded fiercely. The shelves were immaculate, lined with business books, market reports, and law journals. But in the bottom drawer of her desk, slightly ajar, Emma noticed something strange. A plastic tub of brightly colored alphabet charts, a text-to-speech device with frayed headphone wires, large print novels tucked out of sight. She froze. Her mother, Catherine Reed, the woman who had conquered the corporate world, was hiding learning tools meant for children. Emma's throat tightened as realization struck. Dyslexia. She'd built an empire while secretly battling the very thing Emma thought made her weak. For the first time, Emma saw not just the hard shell her mother wore, but the cracks beneath it, and suddenly, all the battles between them looked different. Her rebellion wasn't just against Catherine's control, it was against her fear. She placed the drawer back the way she found it, her hands trembling. Then she stood there in the dark notebook pressed to her chest, understanding for the first time that the woman she called Mom had her own scars carved deep into the very letters she had once forced Emma to master. The library, the parking lot, the study. That night, three hearts carried truths they weren't ready to share yet, were destined to collide. Caleb bore the ghost of a classroom stolen. Catherine carried the shame of a wound she'd never spoken aloud. Emma carried the discovery that her mother was not unbreakable, but human, and in the silence of Ridgeview the fracture between them deepened not to destroy them but to prepare the ground for something none of them could yet imagine healing. Emma stood outside her mother's study door, her heart thudding in her chest like a drumbeat she couldn't silence. The image of those alphabet charts and the text-to-speech device wouldn't leave her. For years she had seen Catherine Reed as unshakable, untouchable. But last night she had seen something else, fragility carefully hidden beneath glass walls. She pushed the door open. Catherine sat at her desk, shoulders stiff, eyes fixed on a glowing spreadsheet. She didn't turn when Emma entered. "Mom." Emma said, her voice low but steady. "Yes." Her tone was clipped defensive, her usual armor. Emma stepped forward and placed the green notebook on her desk, the one Caleb had given her. "I know." Catherine finally looked up. "Know what? About the drawer. The charts, the devices. You're dyslexic." For a moment, the world seemed to stop breathing. Catherine's hand froze on the mouse. Her perfectly controlled expression cracked like glass under strain. "I don't know what you think you saw," she began, her voice trembling in a way Emma had never heard before. "Don't," Emma interrupted, her voice sharper now. "Don't lie to me. Not about this." The silence stretched. Then slowly, Catherine's shoulders sank. She closed her eyes and the strength she had carried like a crown slipped away. "Yes," she whispered. "I am." Emma felt the words hit harder than any lecture, harder than any punishment her mother had ever given. Her throat tightened. "All this time, you pushed me, you tore me apart for every grade, every test, and you were fighting the same war." Tears gathered in Catherine's eyes unbidden. "I fought it alone. Emma, do you understand? When I was your age there was no help, no accommodations. I was the girl who stayed late after school staring at the same page until the letters bled together. I memorized paragraphs instead of reading them. I built my life on pretending." Her voice cracked raw. "If anyone knew, they'd say I wasn't capable. So I buried it. And when I had you, I swore my child would never be weak like me." Emma shook her head, eyes burning. "You don't get it. You weren't weak. You were stronger than anyone. But when you pushed me, it wasn't strength. It was fear, and you broke me with it." Catherine's lips trembled. For the first time in years, she looked small, like the mask had fallen away and left only a woman who had carried too much for too long. The door creaked open and Caleb stepped into the study. He had been walking by, but the voices too raw to ignore had drawn him in. He stopped, sensing he was trespassing on something sacred. Emma turned eyes fierce. "Tell her, Caleb. Tell her I don't need a perfect mother. I need one who believes in me." Caleb's gaze softened. He looked at Catherine, not as a billionaire, not as an adversary, but as a human being unraveling. "Emma's right," he said quietly. "She doesn't need perfection. She needs you brave enough to be fragile in front of her." Catherine's eyes met Caleb's. For years she had avoided being seen, really seen, and now, under the weight of his calm voice, she felt something break open inside her. "You think I can just admit this?" she whispered. "After decades of hiding, after building an empire on the illusion that I was unbreakable," Caleb stepped closer, his voice steady. "Empires fall, but families don't have to. You don't owe the world perfection. You owe your daughter the truth." Emma's voice trembled. I don't want the empire. I just want my mom." That was the moment Catherine broke. The tears she had dammed up for years spilled silent and unstoppable. She covered her face with her hands and shook as sobs rose out of her ragged and raw. Emma, stunned, stepped forward. For the first time she held her mother, not the other way around. "It's okay," Emma whispered. "You don't have to hide anymore." Caleb stayed back watching the two of them. The girl who had once sneered at him was now the anchor holding her mother upright. And the woman who had once threatened to cut him out of her world was crumbling in the arms of her daughter. When Catherine finally lifted her face, her eyes red, she looked at Caleb. There was no mask left, no CEO, no billionaire's heir, just a woman stripped bare. "You said we don't heal wounds," she murmured, remembering his words from the library. "We just hide them, but maybe healing starts here." Caleb gave the faintest nod. "Maybe it does." The silence that followed was not heavy, it was cleansing. Then a knock at the door, Miss Delgado holding a flyer. "Sorry to interrupt, but Emma, I thought you should see this." Emma wiped her eyes, took the paper. Her heart thumped as she read. Announcement, Ridgeview Year-End Speech Contest, open to all students. Theme, voice, and identity. She looked up at her mother, then at Caleb. For the first time she felt a choice was hers to make, not forced upon her. "I'm signing up," Emma said firmly. Catherine inhaled sharply. "Emma." "That's no," she cut in. "Not for you, not for my last name, for me, because for once I want my voice to be mine." Caleb's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then you know where to start." Emma nodded, clutching the flyer. "At 0. That night, the Reed household felt different. No longer a fortress of control and rebellion, but a house where truths had finally broken through. Emma carried the flyer upstairs, a quiet fire in her chest. Catherine sat in her study, no longer hiding the tools in her drawer. And Caleb walked the halls, mop in hand, but lighter somehow, because he had witnessed something that mattered more than any contest, a mother and daughter beginning to see each other at last. The auditorium hummed with anticipation. Parents in pressed suits, students clutching note cards, teachers whispering final instructions. The annual Ridgeview Speech Contest wasn't just another event, it was the crown jewel of the year, the place where reputations were carved and futures polished for college resumes. Emma stood backstage, gripping the edges of her green notebook so hard her knuckles whitened. She could hear the muffled applause for the student before her. Her heart was racing not from fear of the stage, but from fear of silence, of stepping out there and becoming the punchline again. A voice brushed against her thoughts. Not her mother's sharp critiques, not Josh's cruel jeers. It was Caleb's voice, steady and low. "Your ego wants to win today. Your mind wants to win for life." Emma exhaled. The stagehand signaled. Her turn. The spotlight blinded her as she stepped onto the wooden stage. 1,000 faces blurred into shadow. For a moment, her throat locked. She looked down at the first page of her notebook, but the words swam. Then she remembered what Caleb had told her the night before she left. The right thing never begs for applause. Keep laying down the words. She closed the notebook, looked up, and spoke. "My name is Emma Reed," she began. A rustle of whispers ran through the crowd at the weight of that last name. She lifted her chin. "But tonight, I left the name Reed at the door. A hush fell. I came into this school thinking privilege would carry me, that my mother's fortune and power and my last name would mean I didn't have to try. And I was wrong." Her voice cracked, then steadied. "Because privilege can buy you a car, it can buy you a building with your name on it, but it can't buy you understanding, it can't buy you discipline, it can't buy you the courage to start at 0. From the third row, Josh shifted uncomfortably. Emma took a breath. "I failed. Again and again, until someone who wasn't supposed to matter did. A janitor who mopped away more than dirt, he mopped away my illusions." There was a stir in the audience. Teachers exchanged looks. A few chuckled softly, not mockingly, but in awe at the rawness of it. He didn't have titles, he didn't have a corner office, but he had patience. He had a belief that repetition is the birthplace of greatness. He showed me that writing isn't about filling pages, it's about stripping away lies until only truth remains. Emma's voice grew stronger now, as if each word was chiseling through stone. If I win tonight, it's not because I carried the Reed name, it's because I learned to put it down. Silence. Heavy, reverent silence. And then applause. It started with Priya clapping so hard her palms stung. Then others joined. Rows of students, then parents, then the entire auditorium. Within seconds, the applause turned into a roar, people rising from their seats. Emma blinked under the lights, her chest rising with the weight of relief and something she hadn't known she craved. Not applause, but acceptance. At the back of the room, Catherine sat ramrod straight. Her tablet glowed in her lap, the text-to-speech app whispering Emma's words through a discreet earpiece. She had followed every sentence, every pause, every stumble. And when Emma said, "I left the name Reed at the door," Catherine pressed her hand against her mouth. Tears spilled silently down her cheeks. She wasn't crying because her daughter had rejected the name. She was crying because for the first time she realized Emma wasn't rejecting her. Emma was asking her to see her not through the filter of legacy or fear, but as her daughter. In the shadows near the exit, Caleb stood arms crossed, face unreadable. When Emma spoke the line about the janitor, something shifted in him. He didn't move, didn't smile, but his eyes glistened in the half-light. Catherine's gaze drifted upward, scanning the crowd until it landed on him. Across the sea of heads, their eyes met. No words passed, no gestures. Just a quiet recognition thick with the kind of understanding only shared by two people who had carried burdens too heavy too long. For Catherine, it was the first time she saw not just a janitor, not just a man who had disrupted her rules, but someone who had quietly given her daughter back to her. For Caleb, it was the first time he saw not just a billionaire's daughter who had built glass walls around herself, but a mother breaking in the dark trying to love a girl she didn't know how to reach. The applause thundered on, but their silence was louder. By the time Emma left the stage, clutching the green notebook like a lifeline, the world outside had changed. A storm had rolled in, thunder cracking above the gym roof, lightning illuminating the glass walls in bursts of white. Inside, victory tasted sweet. But in the boardroom down the hall where Ridgeview's school board sat around polished oak tables, another storm was brewing. The writing lab was on the agenda. Whispers swirled unauthorized classes, janitors overstepping boundaries, foundations, questioning their support. The same night, Emma earned her standing ovation. The future of Start at Zero was being weighed in silence behind closed doors. The auditorium's cheers masked the sound of the gavel striking wood in the boardroom, but the echo lingered, promising battles yet to come. Outside, rain hammered the school roof like a drumbeat. Inside, Emma held her notebook high, the ovation still ringing in her ears. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that across campus strangers were deciding whether the voice she had just found would be given a home or silenced for good. The boardroom smelled faintly of polished oak and anxiety. A long table stretched beneath the glare of recessed lights, its surface lined with paper packets, coffee cups, and the restless tapping of pens. The Ridgeview School Board had gathered their eyes sharp, their voices clipped, weighing not only a program but a principle, whether the janitor's class deserved to exist. Catherine Reed sat near the end, posture impeccable, her expression unreadable. To anyone else, she looked like the cool, decisive billionaire she'd always been, but under the table her hands twisted the cap of a fountain pen until the plastic nearly cracked. At the far side, Principal Horwitz cleared his throat. Tonight's motion is whether Ridgeview will legitimize the writing lab under official oversight. The proposal is that it function as a sanctioned after-school program with certified volunteer facilitators and board review. His gaze swept toward Caleb Hale, who stood by the wall with the faint humility of someone used to being overlooked. Emma sat in the audience row's backpack at her feet, notebook pressed to her lap. She had never looked smaller and prouder at once. A board member leaned forward. "Mr. Hale, why should this school take a risk on a program led by someone outside formal faculty?" Caleb hesitated. He wasn't wearing a tie. He didn't own one, but he carried himself as if his work boots were as valid as any polished shoe in the room. Because kids don't learn courage from a credential. They learn it from seeing someone show up every day and start again even when no one's watching. That's what writing is. That's what life is. This isn't about me, it's about them. The room grew quiet. Another member interjected. And what happens if the program grows beyond capacity? Catherine's voice cut through before she realized she had spoken. Then we adapt. Programs fail not because they grow, but because people refuse to let them. All heads turned. For once, Catherine didn't retreat behind the armor of her fortune. She met their gazes without flinching. I built empires on my name, but names can also be prisons. If we vote this program through, I will personally endow the Start at Zero Fund, its first project not carrying the Reed legacy but standing on its own. This isn't about legacy, it's about giving these students a place to begin without shame. Murmurs rippled across the table. A younger board member whispered, "She said, known Reed name." Emma felt her throat tighten. She had never seen her mother place herself in a space where she didn't own the room. But tonight, Catherine wasn't conquering. She was surrendering willingly, purposefully. The vote was taken. Hands rose one after another. Aye. Principal Horwitz tallied, then nodded solemnly. Motion carries. The writing lab is approved under official oversight. Emma exhaled, head dropping into her palms. Caleb closed his eyes, shoulders slumping like a man finally setting down a load he'd carried alone for years. Catherine didn't clap. She didn't smile. She simply looked across the room at Caleb. Slowly, deliberately, she extended her hand. Caleb hesitated, then stepped forward. Their palms met calloused against manicured rough, against refined. It was only a handshake, but it lingered longer than necessary, charged with something unspoken. Catherine's lips curved faintly. Caleb's eyes softened. For a flicker, the room around them disappeared. From the back row, Emma whispered to herself, "Maybe beginnings don't always look like fireworks. Sometimes they look like a single hand." Refusing to let go, the next morning an envelope waited on the Reed doorstep. Emma tore it open with shaking hands. "Congratulations, you've been accepted to Hastings College of Liberal Arts." She blinked twice, then reread, then shouted into the empty foyer, "I got in." Catherine hurried down the stairs, her silk robe trailing. She froze when she saw the letter in Emma's hand. "Which school?" Emma grinned so wide it hurt. "Hastings." Her eyebrows arched. "Not Yale, not Stanford. No." Her voice steadied. "I don't need the biggest name. I need the right place. Hastings has small classes, a writing program where people actually care. For once, I'm not chasing status. I'm chasing fit." Catherine's lips parted, but words failed her. The girl, who had once defined herself by cars and credit cards, now stood with the quiet certainty of someone who had stripped away illusion. She added softly, "I don't want to live under your shadow, Mom. I want to find my own." For the first time in years, Catherine felt no urge to correct, to redirect, to control. She only knotted her throat thick. "Then you've made the right choice." That evening, Caleb and Maya stopped by the gymnasium, now half converted into the official Ridgeview Writing Lab. Folding tables lined the floor-green notebooks stacked high. On the far wall, Maya's hand-sketched logo. Start at Zero, in a bold circle, hung proudly framed like art. Catherine entered quietly, heels clicking against the floor. She paused beneath the banner, staring at the childlike curves of the lettering. "Your daughter has vision," she murmured. Caleb smiled. "She sees what adults forget, that circles don't end." Catherine turned, searching his eyes. "I've spent my whole life making deals. Tonight was the first time I made a commitment." Caleb tilted his head. "There's a difference." "Yes." She held his gaze. "A deal is about profit. A commitment is about people." They stood in silence, the hum of the fluorescent lights filling the space between them. Then Catherine extended her hand once more, not for a vote, not for an audience, only for him. This time, Caleb didn't hesitate. Later, Emma sat at her desk, notebook, open pen poised. Her handwriting was steadier now, bolder. Across the top of a clean page, she wrote, "Starting at zero doesn't mean having nothing. It means having the courage to admit what you need and the patience to build it the right way." She paused, letting the ink dry, and smiled. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of the blank page. The morning sun slanted through the tall windows of the Ridgeview Community Center, spilling gold over polished floors and rows of folding chairs. Banners fluttered near the entrance, hand-painted by students who once felt invisible. Across the lobby, a circle-shaped logo drawn by a little girl in a moment of quiet faith now hung enlarged, framed, and proud. Start at zero. Caleb Hale stood in the doorway with Maya, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. She craned her neck, eyes wide. "Daddy, they actually used my drawing." He bent to meet her gaze, his voice soft but firm. "Because you saw it before anyone else did." She grinned, that toothy 9-year-old smile that could break any adult's armor. For Caleb, it broke every scar of doubt he'd carried since the day he laid down his chalk and walked into a janitor's closet instead of a classroom. Inside, the crowd grew. Priya, once timid, now moved among clusters of parents handing out green notebooks with a confidence that surprised even her. Josh, once the loudest heckler, sat in the front row, notebook open, pen tapping nervously against the page. "I'm not ready to read," he admitted to Priya. She squeezed his wrist. "None of us were. That's why we start at zero." When the ceremony began, Catherine Reed stood at the podium. But this time, there was no designer backdrop of glass and steel behind her. No high-rise logo, just a humble banner and rows of expectant faces. Her voice carried a different weight, less commanding, more vulnerable. "When I was a girl, I couldn't read without stumbling. Letters, blurred pages mocked me. I learned to hide, to disguise, to overachieve so no one saw what I lacked. My daughter knows this now because I finally found the courage to tell her." Gasps rippled softly. Few had ever heard Catherine Reed admit to failure, let alone fragility. She glanced toward the second row where Emma sat, straight-backed, notebook balanced on her knees. She met her mother's eyes with something deeper than respect, understanding. Catherine's voice steadied. "We are not here to create prodigies. We are here to create honesty, to give our children what I never had a place to begin again without shame. That's what Start at Zero means." The audience rose in applause. Some parents wiped their eyes. Even the stoic principal cleared his throat twice, pretending it was just the dust of folding chairs. Later, the air buzzed with chatter, students trading notebooks, pages already filling with first lines, shaky but real. Emma laughed with Priya and Josh, the three of them huddled in a corner like comrades after a long battle. Her green notebook, now worn at the edges, lay open to a new page. "Write something," Priya urged. Emma grinned. "I will, but today's line has to wait until tonight. Some things belong in quiet." She nodded knowingly. Across the hall, Catherine and Caleb stacked chairs side by side, the clatter echoing in the now empty space. Neither seemed to mind the menial task. It was almost fitting that after a grand unveiling they ended with their hands on simple work. Catherine broke the silence first. "You never thought about starting over?" Caleb paused, balancing a chair before sliding it into the stack. His voice came low, steady. "I start over every day from zero." She looked at him then, not as the billionaire surveying an employee, but as a woman seeing a man who had carried more weight than he ever admitted and still chose to rise. Her lips parted, then curved into the faintest smile. "Then maybe I should learn from you." For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the lights above seemed louder, the air heavier with the unsaid. No kiss, no dramatic gesture, just silence thick with possibility. Two people standing in the ruins of old walls, staring at a door that had only just opened. That night, Emma sat at her desk beneath a single lamp. The house felt different now, less like a fortress, more like a home. She lifted her pen and wrote slowly, deliberately, "Greatness isn't being seen. It's seeing others, then doing the work." She closed the notebook, fingers brushing the worn green cover, and exhaled. For the first time, the page didn't intimidate her. It welcomed her. Down the hall, Catherine paused at her doorway, watching her with quiet pride. She didn't interrupt. She only let the moment settle into her bones, a truth she had waited years to learn, that letting go could sometimes be the most powerful way to hold on. And in the empty community center, a janitor turned mentor lingered a little longer, wiping down tables, stacking one last chair. His daughter's logo gleamed from the wall, and though no one else saw it, his lips curved upward, not from triumph, but from peace. Because starting at zero, he realized, was never about beginning with nothing. It was about beginning with honesty, with love, and with the courage to build something that might just last. And that's where our story comes to a close, but maybe it's also where a new beginning begins. What about you? Have you ever had to start over from zero? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to read it. And tell me where in the world are you listening from? It's amazing how stories connect us across every distance. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next journey. And if someone you know needs this reminder today, share the video. It might be exactly what they need. From my heart to yours, thank you for being here. Until next time, remember, every ending is just another chance to start at zero.